Hey, folks. Welcome to another edition of the Processing Blue podcast, where you're joined by tired Panthers beat writer Mike Kaye and fellow tired Panthers writer Alex Zietlow, who looks like he came out of a mid-90s movie about a bunch of kids that got lost in the woods, and you're listening to the smooth sounds of a baby crying in the background because it's bedtime. Yep, we made it through the final cut down. We made it through the waiver wire. And we're still here. We're still, well, technically we're not still standing. We're actually sitting down. But there's a lot to get through. Bear with us. We obviously did not run at our normal time on Wednesday, and that's because every spidey sense in this, I know I don't look very old, but seasoned reporter's brain told me that the second we publish this, there's going to be something big. And sure enough, when this podcast would have been published, you would have gotten the news around the time that Adam Thielen was traded from the Panthers to the Minnesota Vikings. Thielen is going to Minnesota along with a 2026 conditional 7th round pick and a 2027 5th round pick. Or, get this, a 2026 4th round pick and a 2026 5th round pick and a 2027 4th round pick.
Got it.
That 7th round pick that is heading to Minnesota, the conditions of that, as I reported earlier today on Wednesday, if Thielen is inactive for more, or if he's active for 10 games or less, or he's not on the roster for 14 games, it'll turn into a 6th round pick. So chances are it's going to be a 7th round pick unless he completely falls off and gets injured again. He played 10 games last year, battling a hamstring injury. So with all that said, Alex, what's your take?
On the day?
No, on the trade. Let's start with the trade. Let's start small for a second.
I mean, this is pretty massive, so this is the biggest thing to come out of the day. Just immediate thoughts. I'm cool with it. If I'm a Panthers representative, if I follow the Panthers, I do not get this feeling that I think a lot of Panthers fans have had over the course of the past couple of years of this front office got taken advantage of or exploited. I don't think that happened because I think you mentioned it in your succinct summary. The Vikings have agreed to pay all of Adam's base salary. They got actually decent compensation for him when it comes to draft inventory. The Panthers also were already in need of freeing up some space in that wide receiver room. We've talked about it literally all off season about how this team has 7 guys, really 8 guys that could have made the team. We'll talk about Hunter Renfrow later getting cut, but this kind of met the ends of both the short-term needs of the Minnesota Vikings and also the long-term needs of the Panthers. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. And I think both front offices should be happy with how this whole thing went down. I was thinking about one thing that you said, Mike. I can't remember if it was in person or over Twitter, but it is so funny to me that the Vikings have, I don't know if it's the Vikings organization, but just how the information flowed out about how, Adam really wants to be in Minnesota. His wife is posting things on social media about, I want about this idea of coming home to Minnesota. It almost made it seem like the Panthers front office was not letting him live out his dream. And you said something to the effect of it's funny that Minnesota's in this position now because they were the ones who released him 2 years ago because he was getting old, because he was expensive, and all these reasons. And now all of a sudden he wants to go back, and Minnesota's a safe haven for him. I think that's kind of interesting. But just put a bow on my point. If you're a Panthers fan, I think you're cool with it. The next question is who replaces him, and Jalen Coker did a really good job in Adam's stead last year, particularly in the slot. I think I did the Pro Football Focus math earlier today. I think his slot percentage, the amount of snaps he took at the slot went up by like 15% when Adam wasn't there. So they were still moving Jalen Coker around a lot, but clearly he was meant for that role, or at least this Dave Canales offense sees him in that role. So, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of just rambling right now. Excuse me, I am punch drunk, as you are as well after these long 2 days. But overall, if you're a Panthers fan, I think you should be cool with it.
Yeah, I think so. I think what you said about both teams being happy with the outcome is fair. I don't think this is a slam dunk for either team. I think there is the possibility of a letdown in offensive performance in a year that is very big for Bryce Young, which in turn is very big for Dave Canales. I think the Vikings are kind of looking. I mean, look, everybody's going to talk about Thielen going back home. I think that's a terrific story. You and I both got to know Adam a little bit. I got to spend some time with his family too during their charitable events. Good dude. 100% wanted to go back to Minnesota. This was not like if he did not want to go back to Minnesota, this trade's not made. I promise you. It wouldn't have been. And so, ultimately, the Vikings got their guy. Kevin O'Connell has a very intricate offensive system. Adam's brilliant. He knows the system. He was in it in 2022. But again, they cut him thinking that he was aging and expensive, and now they trade for him 2 years later when, guess what? He's 2 years older and has aged, and it's still relatively expensive because they're fronting the whole bill for him. So I think, from that perspective, listen, if you want to do the raw numbers on this, the Panthers got improved day 4 draft picks at the top end, day 3 draft picks. They got better at the top end of day 3 in 2 straight years. And they opened up $7 million, which, by the way, they can roll over into next year and help enhance their spending next year. Because next year, their salary cap space situation's fine, but it's not great. And so I think when you look at Taylor Moton's rework contract and Thielen leaving, you're opening up a pile of cash. Maybe that wasn't the initial reasoning for making the move. I think they rewarded somebody who wanted to be here, and they rewarded somebody who didn't want to be here. I think, or at least wanted to be somewhere else.
That's a good point.
And I think that's one, good for probably morale. And 2, I don't think it's a situation where the wide receivers in that room hold it against Adam. And look, like you said, all of these, the internet loves Jalen Coker. Now's his time to show that he's the dude, right? And so you drafted 2 wide receivers in the first round back-to-back. You bring in Jimmy Horn, you bring in Jalen Coker. David Moore is the ultimate, teacher's guy. And, I mean, then you have Bryson Tremaine, who can be a standout on special teams, but also has some upside at wide receiver. They brought in another wide receiver via the waiver wire, which I'm going to count on Alex to say his name. But the way they're talking about him, he's kind of like Kasim Osgood. I don't know if you remember him. He was like an all-around awesome special teams player back in the day. But yeah, I mean,
my best guess at his name, at least right now, we'll soon meet him, is Daylavon Campbell.
Daylavon Campbell, cool. And yeah. Look, even Canales had an issue with it. So it's not just me this time, guys.
Yeah.
So they have 7 guys on the roster. None of them are Hunter Renfrow. We'll get into a conversation about Hunter Renfrow towards the end of the podcast. So stick around for that, because there was some other big news on Wednesday that I think needs to be addressed right away. Alex, take it away.
Yeah, so leading all the non-Adam Thielen trade roster movement Wednesday was the fact that the Panthers might be without starting left tackle Ike Ekwonu in week 1. He was not at practice on Tuesday. All we knew was that it was an illness. He also wasn't at practice Wednesday, and we also didn't get to talk to Dave Canales, who handles all the injury updates after Tuesday. This was the first time we've talked to him this week. And so then we asked Dave about Ike's status today. Turns out that he had an appendectomy on Sunday night. Yes, he had appendicitis. And that is making him, quote, day-to-day all the way up to the game. Canales essentially said that after the surgery, he had his appendix removed after the surgery. We've seen these sorts of surgeries, like players have been able to get onto the field after an appendectomy in a little over a week. Oftentimes it is longer. It just depends on each individual body, how each body responds to the surgery, if Icky's body will heal the right way, all these things.
Sure.
So, but at least how I heard it, I don't know how you heard it, Mike. At least how I heard it, I think the Panthers are preparing for Ickey Ekwonu to be there at week 1, but they're also preparing for him. They're planning for him to be there, but they're also enhancing their plan B, which is probably Josh Nijman being that left tackle, or doing some reworking. Well, I think they're actually going to have Josh Nijman be that left tackle if Ickey can't go. Maybe Brady Christensen, who has been this like sixth man on this offensive line and did take a lot of preseason snaps at that left tackle spot. But that's the big news coming, like non-roster news coming out of today. And honestly, it was pretty shocking and something that like I don't like. You can never plan for an appendectomy, but for it to happen to your left tackle, like is just like absolutely brutal. He's among the most. He's probably the most important guy positionally on that offensive line, and for that to happen right before week 1 is just absolutely brutal. I don't know how you feel about it, Mike.
Well, and I think what makes it worse is that Damian Lewis, the left guard, is dealing with a shoulder injury. So you could potentially have your entire left side of the line done by fill-ins. Granted, we'll talk about this later, but the 53-man roster is made up of an offensive line of guys who were here last year. So everybody's been here and everybody's played. Christensen's played left tackle for this team. Josh Nijman has started for this team. Kate Mays has started for this team at both guard and center. So, like, it's not like these guys are inexperienced. Chandler Zavala, too. But it does kind of throw, like, a wrench in potential optimism for the blocking for Bryce Young. So not only is he going to be without his most trusted wide receiver in week 1, he's going to potentially be without 2 of his trusty guys to his blind side. And so I think, like, that is somewhat concerning. I mean, the Jaguars aren't particularly proficient in pass rushing, but they do have a pair of first-round picks at edge rusher. So it's like, it's going to be interesting there. I mean, first off, you think about the human having to deal with that. What I'd say is I'm not, as Bryce Young said, I'm not a doctor, which I don't know if there's proof that he's not, but I don't know what goes into an appendectomy, but if there's stitches, think about this. J.C. Horn had stitches on his hand for 3 weeks, and they didn't want to risk any infection with those stitches. So part of me is like, if this was on his body and, if it wasn't done, I forgot the word for it, when it's outside the body, you know what I mean? Like where you don't need to,
I can't help you there.
We're both not doctors, even though Alex has like a very nice diploma behind his head. If you're watching this, and I apologize if you're watching the video and you see me on my phone. I'm still kind of working the phones as the roster moves kind of go through. But yeah, I mean, what's your level of concern if he can't play week 1 and potentially Damian Lewis is out week 1? Like, how much do you trust Nijman / Christensen and Mays / Zavala?
I trust Brady Christensen.
What an endorsement. You're talking about them like they're a kicker of an NFL franchise, if you get my drift.
He's our left tackle for now.
So, yeah, I mean, I think I'm with you. I'm a Christensen guy through and through. Still bananas to me that the Bengals didn't offer him a contract. But let's look at that.
Yeah,
speaking of the kicker, let's talk about kicker, because I think Dave Canales, does a very good job of protecting people. I think he was very kind to Adam Thielen and his outlook on the trade today when we talked to him on Wednesday. Ryan Fitzgerald, I've given better reviews or endorsements to Applebee's like low end steaks, like the lower end of their steak options.
Okay, Mike, I'm just going to stop you right there. Anyone who's a friend of Alex Zietlow knows that he loves Applebee's. So you're just trying to slide this diss in there without.
I'm just trying to think of like a chain that it would be like people.
Well, then don't come at Applebee's, dog. Well, then don't come at Applebee's.
I mean, so, but anyway, but I'm saying I've given better endorsements to them. So anyway,
yes, but you're putting it down, bro. Like that's the place where Ricky Bobby got kicked out of. It's like, it's Hollywood, bro. Applebee's is Hollywood. Anyway, go on with your point.
NASCAR Zietlow over here. No, he was asked about the kicking situation, and I got to tell you, every time we've asked him about it over the last maybe 10 days, it's been like, well, yeah, sure, we'll go with him, with Ryan Fitzgerald. And to be honest with you, in watching camp, and if you follow this podcast, nobody really ran away with this job. If anything, you're keeping Ryan Fitzgerald because he got more opportunities and is younger and has upside. Matthew Wright's kind of what he is, right? And so we watched Ben Sauls hit 4 of 4 on the Panthers' home turf. Didn't put in a claim for him. He's still potentially an option. I think they're going to be kind of nervous heading into week 1, and we'll see what happens.
So Mike, I was posed this question actually yesterday on What else could Ryan Fitzpatrick done to assuage?
You mean Fitzgerald? Fitzgerald, sorry.
What did I say? Sorry.
Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, now he's a guy that they could have used before they signed Hendon Hooker to the practice squad. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Oh my God,
you're so tired, guys, and I know that's not great radio, but
that's crazy. I'm so sorry.
You stopped your point. Go ahead.
No, I'm glad that you corrected me. What could Ryan Fitzpatrick done differently?
No, it's Fitzgerald.
Wait, what did I?
You said Fitzpatrick.
I'm gonna like tear up. No, Ryan Fitzgerald. What could he have done differently this preseason? Truly, because yes, he wasn't super proficient on the skinny post when we saw him kick every other day in training camp. But on the kickoffs, he was doing exactly what special teams coordinator Tracy Smith wanted the kickers to do. He was perfect in all point after attempts and field goals. Yes, there in the preseason, yes, he didn't have many attempts because the Panthers offense was not super good, but that's what he did. Truly, what else could he have done? And I was posed that question. I was like, you know what? It's a good point. Like, we initially were super compelled by this guy's big leg. It juxtaposed greatly from Eddie Pinheiro, who was remarkably accurate, but as people know, didn't have the strongest leg. That wasn't his forte. And then all of a sudden during the practices, he was missing some on the skinny post, and we were just like, okay, it's now a real competition. Just because he was competing with Matt Wright and didn't run away with the competition doesn't mean that he's not worthy of an NFL job. And I don't really know what else he could have done truly, but yet there's still this weird sentiment out there yo, the Panthers could do better outside. And even Dave, and to our point, when I said he's our left tackle for now, that's literally what Dave Canales said when we asked him, hey, how are you feeling about Ryan Fitzgerald? He was like, he's our kicker for now. And it's yo, wait, what? One of my favorite media members, after he said for now, which is dang, it was such a strange way to put it. I fear that we are making a lot of Dave Canales' comment personally, or because he ultimately then clarified, no, that's how I feel about every position, and we know that is the standard there.
Except for David Moore.
I think with David Moore, he would. I can explain why David Moore deserved to be on this team 100 ways to Sunday. He's a wonderful special teams player. He is now an important veteran voice in this locker room. I know you're rolling your eyes, but
No, I'm not at you. There's stuff going on.
Okay, well, he's
no, I think David Moore deserves to be on the roster. I'm not.
Yeah. I know. But it's like when it comes to this kicking game, I truly don't know what else he could have done. That's really my point. I know it's really circular, but
I think what it is Matthew Wright looked fine, and so did Ryan. And I think there was like the sense of this kid was going to come in here and just be like a guy who could do some big things. I thought he was pretty inconsistent during the summer. I think FanFest missing 2 48-yarders probably stuck in a lot of people's minds, including ours. And I think
the FanFest is real. The FanFest misses were real. I forgot to mention that.
I think if he makes both those, this competition ends sooner.
Probably.
I just think like that probably got a little bit of like a, but anyway, speaking of the roster, let's kind of get into it. So I figured we'll go through the groups and then kind of chat about it overall. I don't think we need to go through every single group. We just spent a bunch of time talking about wide receivers and offensive linemen, but they ended up keeping 2 quarterbacks as expected, Bryce Young and Andy Dalton. You might have heard of them. As I reported earlier today, they're planning on adding Hendon Hooker to the practice squad. He's a guy who has really good potential, former Lions draft pick. Dave Canal said that he felt like he really enjoyed his draft process. So he's going to be here instead of Jack Plummer. At running back, they kept their predicted 3. All right, pour one out for Alex. Because Raheem Blackshear was cut in favor of Chuba Hubbard, who was going to make the team anyway, Rico Dowdle, who was going to make the team anyway, and Trevor Etienne, who was going to make the team anyway. At wide receiver, they kept 7. It's T-Mac McMillan, Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker, for all you guys out there. Jimmy Horn Jr., they didn't cut him, so no reason to have all that angst. David Moore, Bryson Tremaine, and then they bring in Campbell, who we mentioned earlier. Then at tight end, they kept 4. Friend of the show, James Mitchell, made the roster. He was a guy that I would have kept, but when I put out my 53, I tried to think about it from the Panthers' point of view, and I figured they'd want to really highlight Mitchell Evans, who now I think will be probably inactive early on in the season. He's here. And then the top 2 guys, Jatavian Sanders and Tommy Tremble, they're ready to go, it seems. Although Tommy Tremble might be eased in week 1 or week 2, depending on how he feels with his back. On the offensive line, they kept 9 guys, as I said. So it was Iquanu, Lewis, Corbett, Hunt, Moton, who just signed a big contract extension. That also happened, but there's so much news. We can't break this all down. Chandler Zavala, Cade Mays, Yash Nijman, and there's one other person that I'm missing, aren't I?
You say Zavala?
Yeah, I did say Zavala. So they kept 9. Sorry, I was thinking like 10. Jared Kingston was retained on the practice squad. That's good news. I thought he had a really good summer. So let's talk about the offense right now. I kind of think the offense, following the Thielen trades, in fine shape from a numbers perspective. I mean, with my, every year I do a waiver claim, got options thing. I had no offensive players on that list. I think that says a lot about them. They're bringing DJ Dallas to be on the practice squad. He's a really good special teams player. He can also run the football. He's an upgrade over Imani Bailey and Raheem Blackshear in a lot of different ways. I think the offense is fine. I mean, look, I think it's a massive drop-off from – not a massive drop-off, but I think it is a big drop-off in proof with Thielen and Coker. But I think overall, I think the offense is in pretty good shape. What do you think?
I think so, too. Are we going to do the Hunter Renfrow conversation now?
You know what? Let's do that. Let's do that instead of waiting for it. Hunter Renfrow was cut by the Panthers on Tuesday as part of their cut down. According to Canals, they've been in constant contact since the cut. Based on my read, they've offered him a practice squad spot, but he wants to figure out what he wants to do. remember Renfrow went through last season where he was suffering, an intestinal issue, worked his way back. Canal said that he saw peaks and valleys with his performance. I think that's actually very fair. I know he was built up a lot by us early on because he was having a fantastic first 10 days of training camp. He then hurts his hamstring, is sidelined for both the joint practices, isn't really participating, comes back around the middle of the preseason. In practice, I barely noticed him during the preseason stretch. And then during the preseason, he was averaging like 3 or 4 yards a catch. Obviously, Jack Plummer throwing you the football is different than Bryce Young throwing you the football, but I kind of get it. Like, I had him on my final 53. I thought he did enough to make it, but obviously David Moore is a guy who they think very highly of. Plus, they got 2 young guys. They have a young guy in, Jimmy Horn, who they wanted to develop, and Bryson Tremaine was almost undeniable. And you wrote a fantastic feature about him the other day. What are your thoughts on Hunter Renfrow?
Yeah, I think I hate to just parrot the head coach, but I think a lot of it did come down to special teams because Hunter Renfrow wasn't a gunner. He essentially his role on special teams was going to be returner. He had no other experience. He's 29 years old. He had no other experience doing anything else on special teams besides returning punts and kicks. And David Moore is a great special teams player. Bryson Tremaine flashed really well, according to special teams coordinator Tracy Smith this camp.
Sorry to cut you off. I'd argue that Bryson Tremaine and Thomas Nkoun were like miles better than everybody on special teams this summer. Like consistently just affecting plays. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and I think that's ultimately what it came down to. I think his health did have something to do with it. I mean, he spent an entire year battling ulcerative colitis out of the league. And though he did start camp off really strong, the moment that his hamstring got hurt, he didn't really seem to be immediately the same, kind of like what you were mentioning. And I think that's what those dips that Dave Canales was talking about with him. So I think ultimately it made sense. I still am empathetic to the Panthers fan that's like, wait, what happened? We didn't get to see training camp. Y'all kept tweeting about how great he was catching passes from Bryce Young, how he was running with the ones, how he was being involved in the wide receiver screen game, but also in the deep game, like all these things. Like, what happened? And then who is this Bryson Tremaine guy? I do understand that whiplash. Just a real quick thing on Bryson Tremaine. I think if Bryson Tremaine doesn't shine, then Hunter Renfrow is on this 53-man roster. Bryson Tremaine is this guy who had a previous relationship with Brad Idzik. If you go back to his college days, even go back to his high school days, when he was a junior in California playing football, he went to a camp at Stanford and got connected with Brad Idzik, who was a graduate assistant over at Stanford at the time. And they were started with Twitter DMs, and it went to text messages, then it went to the occasional phone call. And Brad was essentially saying like, hey, Stanford really wants you to be a preferred walk-on here. I know you have other options and offers in the Ivy League, but hey, you can come to Stanford, be a preferred walk-on, and we will give you a fair shot at this whole thing. So Bryson ultimately gets persuaded, goes to Stanford, has a redshirt year, was a walk-on that redshirt year, and then actually earns a scholarship at Stanford before even playing in a game. Has a pretty solid year. He battles an injury. He actually breaks his ankle, dislocates and breaks his ankle at the same time. I don't exactly know how that goes, but he did all that. He comes back from that injury, gets his spring back, gets his pop back, battles in the NFL, is jumping from practice squad to practice squad. Last year, finally gets in a game, gets one reception for -2 yards, struggling through all that. And then, lo and behold, we learned today that the personnel department for the Panthers ultimately spotted this guy and brought him over to Carolina. But once he came to Carolina, guess who was in his phone again? Offensive coordinator Brad Idzik saying, hey, if you come here and you do exactly what you do at Stanford, we're going to give you a fair shot. On top of that previous relationship, you also have Brant Tillis, who is this guy known for trying to build, for really trying to reward players in training camp. You can look back to his days in Kansas City where he took this guy named Turk Wharton, and who was this undrafted guy out of this D2 college, was not supposed to make the Kansas City 53-man roster, was very easily supposed to be written off as this guy who's going to be a practice squad guy, and the Chiefs can just develop him and get him into the 53 from there. But Turk had such a good camp in that 2020 Kansas City Chiefs training camp that Brand essentially said, yo, if we don't put Turk on this 53-man roster, we're going to have no credibility with the team. We are going to essentially self-sabotage and say, yo, Brand doesn't say yo this much, I promise. But if we don't put Turk on this team, then all this smoke about us saying we care about the training camp, what you do actually does impact your status with this organization. It just wouldn't be true. And so you take Brad Idzik's relationship with Bryson Tremaine. You take the fact that he is a special teams player, but also has some interesting tools as a wideout. And then you take the fact that this front office values rewarding players playing well in training camp. That's how you got Bryson Tremaine. And then someone has to be out if you're going to put Bryson Tremaine in that 7. And that odd guy out happened to be Hunter Renfrow. I think you can't tell the story of Hunter Renfrow without telling the story of Bryson Tremaine.
Well, I think we've cornered the market on the most Bryson Tremaine talk in the history of the planet, but that's pretty cool.
You didn't think that was cool, though? I thought that was interesting, like the parallels between Stanford and his time in Carolina.
It sounds like Raheem Blackshear's already been replaced, and not on the roster, but in the heart of a man. Anyway,
there will always be space for Raheem Blackshear. Well, we always have to, bro.
So let's get into the defense. So they kept 5. Well, initially they kept 6. They cut Jaden Crumedy to make room for waiver claims today. They have 5 on the roster, and it was the 5 that I predicted in my 53. It's A'Shawn Robinson, Tershawn Wharton, who you brought up earlier, Derek Brown, Bobby Brown, and Cam Jackson. Then, outside linebacker, they've got Patrick Jones, Princely Umanmielen, Thomas Incoom, Nick Scorton, DJ Wanham, and DJ Johnson, who I'm a tad surprised that he made the roster, but we'll get into that later. At inside linebacker, Trevin Wallace, Christian Roseboom, Claude Cherilus, and bam! Martin Scott. At cornerback, they have Mike Jackson, J.C. Horn, Shaw Smith-Wade, Caleb Evans, and Corey Thornton. And then at safety, Trevon Merrick, Nick Scott, Damani Richardson, Lathan Ransom. Let's talk about this defense because I think they're improved. I think they won't be.
Why are you smiling like that?
I don't think this defense is going to be particularly good. I think they'll be fine, maybe. Like, I think they're going to rank in the 20s in basically every category, which, to be fair, is better than ranking last in a bunch of categories. So I think there will be some improvement. I'm very concerned about safety, especially if they're starting Nick Scott, even though we really like Lathan Ransom, who, by the way, we, gave a glow up to on this last podcast, and then he balled out in the final preseason game.
Who says there's such a thing as an observer curse? Not us. Okay.
Well, Chris Barnes might, after you wrote a banger of a story, and then he got cut, and now he's in the practice squad. But we'll get to that later. Anyway, nobody's ever going to want to talk to us again at this podcast. Actually, technically, David Moore and James Mitchell made the team. Look at us.
Hey, you know what it is? It's not. If we write about you in the paper, it's a problem. Well, actually, no. I wrote about Bryson Tremaine too. But if we write about you in the paper, it can get iffy.
It's like a 50-50 shot. If we talk about you on the podcast, you're in, man.
Exactly. Yep.
That's why you listen to the Processing Blue podcast, and thank you guys for sticking with us, even though we are very clearly tired. Anyway. I'm sure if we had like a consultant for this, they'd be like, stop mentioning that you're tired, but we're real at the Processing podcast. So I'm very concerned about inside linebacker depth, and I don't know that there's like a bigger fan of Claude Cherilus' style of play than me, outside of maybe the front office. But like, if one of those guys goes down, I don't think Christian Roseboom was particularly proficient throughout the summer either. There's a lot of pressure on Trevin Wallace. Trevin Wallace is essentially the Xavier Legette of the defense, in that all this change around him has led to him having like this role that's, while not like the face of the defense, which is J.C. Horn and Derek Brown, a lot is riding on him ascending in year 2. And I think, like, in order for this defense to be good against the run, Trevin Wallace is going to have to be a very good player. And this defensive line is really going to have to deliver, with Wharton and Cam Jackson and Bobby Brown being added to the mix. I think Trevon Moehrig's pretty impressive. There are too many question marks at safety. What's your take?
Yeah, I'm not as concerned at safety for this team as I think you are, and we can get into why. But I do share your concern when it comes to this linebacker crew. I am utterly shocked that they cut Chris Barnes. Now, Chris Barnes came back on the practice squad, and so we talked about it. He might be like the first guy called up if there is an opening on this defense. But I think that he could be really valuable. He only was with this team for 2 weeks. He was called up in the middle of training camp after the Josie Jewell news, or after Josie Jewell exited, and they had to get their bearings and figure out, okay, who is still out there, who has familiarity with a similar kind of system, which Chris Barnes did, and who is a good communicator and who is kind of a veteran presence and all these things. And they got this guy in Chris Barnes. He might not have played the best preseason game. Like, he might have been thinking a little too much on the field and stuff, but his ability to communicate with the rest of the guys, the fact that he's 27 years old but has played in the league for 5 years, the fact that he has proven that he can be ready at a moment's notice and he prepares like a true professional. I mean, he's this guy, he was this undrafted rookie who, with the Green Bay Packers, ended up being a starter in that year's NFC Championship game because of a whole bunch of injuries on that side of the ball. Last year with the Arizona Cardinals, he wasn't playing at all, essentially. I mean, he was active for most of the games, but he wasn't playing at all, essentially. And then a whole bunch of injuries happened against his former team, the Packers, last year, and he's starting to play like a starter again, and he is like similarly productive. Like, I think having a guy like that in your on your active roster is important. I was a bit confused to not see his name out there, but he still was retained on the practice squad, so that's good. But just generally speaking, this linebacker room is really thin, and Clyde Charles, I too think he's good. Trevin Wallace, spoiler alert, I think he's going to be the MVP of this defense overall this year, just because, for a variety of reasons that I'll get into later on CharlieObserver.com. But is Christian Roseboom the guy? Like, is he worthy of the green dot? Is the other guy is Bam Martin-Scott, this undrafted guy who did make plays in the preseason, but I don't know. Is he?
I would be stunned if Bam Martin-Scott plays on the next.
Yeah. So I don't know, and that's all 4 of them. So
I think the reason why I'm so confused as to why DJ Johnson is on the roster, we know Thomas Incoom is a phenomenal special teams player. Like, I think he is their best special teams player, and those I've spoken with agree with me. You're keeping 4 inside linebackers at the cost of keeping DJ Johnson as your 6th outside linebacker after what you've seen from him for the past 2 years. And, he's been dealing with a hip injury all this summer. I don't know. I don't think that's all that clever of a, 53-man accounting. They did add Damari Mathis to the roster via the waiver claim. He's got an experience with, surprise, Ejiro Evero. So he's another guy that knows the system and should be able to start right off the bat as a, contributor. I think he would probably back up Shaw Smith-Wade. He would probably get some time if Mike Jackson or J.C. Horn had injuries. Corey Thornton still on the roster, very well deserved. We kind of already talked about special teams. Sam Martin, legit. J.J. Jansen, too legit to quit. And, Ryan Fitzgerald is the kicker for now. But, look, I think it's been a busy day, and it's a lot to process, Blue. But I think, the biggest takeaway I have is, one, the Panthers aren't done churning the roster. Two, I think their practice squad is going to be a little bit more, their practice squad strategy is going to be a little bit more aggressive than, hey, we know these guys. And I think, if you like to cling on to an interesting practice squad story, Hendon Hooker, as that third quarterback over Jack Plummer is very, very interesting. And so, look, I think the Thielen trade was fine. I don't think that it was a massive win for the Panthers. I think it goes into the trajectory of what this team wants to be, which is a long-term contender. And by the time they're contending, Adam Thielen's probably retired. That fourth-round pick in 2027 is probably not going to touch the field until Adam Thielen's retired. So they extended the value of Adam Thielen at least for 2 years. And so I think, if you're the Panthers, you feel good about the future. That said, you're taking away a big positive from the past. And I think that's going to be something they're going to have to learn to get through. Listen, if the young kids ball out, everybody's going to look at Dan Morgan like he's a genius, like the Mike Jackson trade for Mike Barrett. But if Thielen goes out and he puts up 1,000 yards, which I don't think he'll get enough targets to do that, with Justin Jefferson there and Jordan Addison coming back from suspension in a few weeks. But if he has a great year and they go on this huge run, I think the Vikings, especially their fans, who I've gotten to know pretty well over social media the last couple of days, will boast about it. I think, look, every trade is a risk. Every draft pick's a risk. Every move you make's a risk, really. And so I think the Panthers have taken smart steps to ensure long-term that they can grow. It's just a matter of, hey, how can this coaching staff, how can this roster perform? And that's what it's always been, right? We've said before, if this team is contending after the first month, it's a very big step up, because you and I have not covered a Panthers team where they are in contention beyond. I mean, they were in contention with Steve Wilkes toward the end, but it never kind of felt like they were there. It kind of felt like there was a carrot on a stick, in front of them. And so I think a big step forward is, can Bryce Young, be what he is without Adam Thielen, without the defense potentially giving up 30 points a game. You're trying to find different angles here, and can Ejiro Evero have a massive bounce back season for his unit? I think that's just as important as Bryce Young having wide receivers he trusts. And so, Leggett and Coker have been here. They really like McMillan. They really like Horn. David Moore is a solid veteran. Tommy Tremble and Jatavian Sanders have been in the offense for more than a year. Chuba Hubbard's the straw that stirs the drink. The offensive line's been together. I think they're fine entering the season. I'm not trying to deter excitement, but I think if you're a fan who's this is another CMC trade or another Brian Burns trade, this is not what that is. And I think you can take solace in that. I think this was a legitimately shrewd move by the Panthers. Will it pay off immediately? Probably not. But could it pay off long term? Sure.
And will it pay off immediately? Almost certainly not, at least in the way it looks, because, like we mentioned, 2 of Bryce's 5 starting offensive linemen are injured right now. We don't know their availability for week 1. That's a big story that amid all this massive cacophony is going to come into focus the next couple of days, I think. Mike, you ready to go?
Oh, don't you know it? Thanks, guys, for joining us. Alex sent us home.
Thanks, as always, for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers with Mike Kaye and myself and our wonderful producer, Zach Dennis. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to charlotteobserver.com for all your Panthers needs. Mike, stay humble, stay creative, and keep processing.
That's a wrap, Zach.